So again, SPY coming in off the lows this morning, 560.18, a high of 561.72 in the pre-hour markets. I've marked that. We'll see where we move from there. But starting off at the open here with a little bit of positive move. NASDAQ now up almost a point here, so that's good to see. We know it had gone up as high as almost at 1.5 points earlier in the pre-market trading. And after PCE had pulled back as low as half a point, so it has picked up about 1/4 of the point here on open. So seeing a little bit of a green there. Let's take a look at our heat maps here on Quasar Markets Live from TradingView. See Apple up about 1.5 points. Not really many sectors that are going one way or the other yet. Seeing a mixed bag. Did mention that earlier, that we are definitely seeing earnings report more as a driver here today or this week than we have previously, and leading to a little bit of this choppiness in the market. There hasn't really been a one-way directional pick the last couple of days. We've seen this early morning sort of run up, get sold off in the afternoons. So we'll see what we get here today leading into the holiday weekend. I was watching crowd really has bounced back nicely here, trying to get back up. Got to break through that resistance at 286.08 that I see. But again, crowd one that had been hurt after their earnings reports, and it wasn't really a miss there. Earnings, they actually had a beat in both earnings and revenue. Nice one. Again, TradingView, what a great option it is right here to be able just to pull that up without having to go off 7 screens. But there was more in the fact of that big outage they had a month ago that caused the problems, and that now they really are trying to move in the right direction. That they were repairing those and catching a little bit of a bid here. But as I mentioned, 286.08, an area that I'm looking at as it approaches that, a little tough. Another one that had seen some nice growth, nice move up after their earnings was Box. Again, a cloud storage company, had a nice 10% beat on their earnings and exceeded their revenue estimates. So they had a nice jump up the other day. But here I'm actually seeing a little bit of it. Looks like it's tiring out. If I look at RSI here, it's been up in that 70 area for a while. Bounced down, trying to bounce back up here in the last hour on the open. So you do see what I consider to be more retail buyers as we get right at the open. Look like they're trying to push it back up, but that one I think is going to be a little bit more difficult. To me, seems to be tiring out a bit. There we go. Apple here. And again, I pointed out, looking at one earlier that was showing a higher high, higher low on its move up here. We can see as Apple made the nice move yesterday afternoon, as it came through in pre-market hours. Lower high here, so we are seeing a similar low. If I see it break below that 229.40 area, I'd be concerned about it moving downward, towards the bottom of that linear regression. So keep your eyes on that. Intel, again, another one. A chip manufacturer got a nice move up today. They did have some news. Positive news out about investment and fundraising that helped move that up. In fact, they have that news right here for us, that they're working with Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs to raise some money, because that their the shares have been the lowest since 2013, but it looks like they're going to raise some money here and move up. Market's moving up with them. Again, you can see this has been what I'm talking about with the choppiness and not being able to see any follow through so far. Is again, we hit this high here about 5 a.m. on Thursday the 22nd at 21.55. We got the nice pump here, sort of completing that swoon, but just rejected pretty hard at it. So 21.51, the area I'd be watching there. Got to get back through that to show any follow through. AMD, again, we know AMD had seen a drop with all the other chip companies following what happened, with NVIDIA's earnings. Trying to make it a little bit of a regrowth here. 1.53 up today. This one's got a little bit of room to run. Got some room to 150, almost 151 here on the top side. Did get firmly rejected from the top of that hourly linear regression, so it's going to have to break through that to get moving there. So as we talked about that volatility yesterday. Let me get that off the screen for us. VIX dropping down here about 3%. A little over that, back down to about 15. Makes sense. PCE, NVIDIA earnings, all the big earnings sort of already happened. So they're thinking volatility here dropping down a little bit. That could lead to a little bit of a ho-hum day. I do think a lot of folks are on the beach having a little vacation. I know our main man Steve Orr's enjoying his Labor Day weekends already. Steve will be back with us Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. as we kick off our coverage next week. I did want to talk a little bit. We haven't talked much this week about Bitcoin as it tries to battle back up here towards 60,000. I had looked up a few things overnight last night and this morning to talk about. There's been so much consternation that we haven't seen a huge move up on Bitcoin. That it's been sort of range bound here as I pull out into a daily chart. I will point out a couple of things. We are still pretty firmly in what I would determine to be a bull flag here in the daily chart. And that's still in place. And, while we have been stuck between this range of about 55 and 70, going back all the way to March, that's what Bitcoin tends to do is it coils up following the halvening and gets ready to explode, as supply starts to lose momentum in regards to demand. And what I mean there is most of every 4 years there's something called the halvening, where the rewards or the way that new Bitcoin is generated reduces by half. That happened in April of this year. But there is usually an 8 to 10 month lag before we see that supply diminishing get affecting the price, where demand starts to stay the same and the lesser supply causes the price to go up. It doesn't happen overnight. That takes a while. But what I started to look at was a little bit into the Bitcoin ETFs. We are definitely seeing withdrawals. We've seen 3 days straight of withdrawals. About $71.8 million worth came out of there. And actually, for the first time, we've seen some outflows, first time since March, some outflows out of BlackRock, some net outflows out of their ETF. And that's, the first time that we've really seen that since May, excuse me. I said March, I apologize. And I point that out because one of the things I did want to mention is that, even with all these ETFs trading this great volume, and alone with BlackRock, they hold 350,000 Bitcoin as of today, or last night, excuse me, I did this overnight. So as of last night, they held over 350,000 Bitcoin, making them one of the largest institutional holders of Bitcoin out there. And a couple of things I noticed from that as I was looking at slippage or the difference in the ask bid price on Bitcoin on the major exchanges, especially Kraken and Coinbase, because we know that they're the two major trading places for these ETFs. And what we found was that slippage has not changed very dramatically. It's moved very small amount. In the case of Coinbase, really not at all. So, that's a very promising indicator for me that liquidity is really high in the marketplace, that people are buying what is out there. So, again, I was looking at that, and I thought that was a positive. I did notice too, interesting, that without all the outflows, ARC, which seems to be like the inverse of everybody else, in my opinion, when it comes to stuff lately, ARC is actually has about 5.3 million in inflows this week. So when the others didn't, there. What I was looking at was to see where we are with sell pressure that could come from both the U.S. government, where we know that they own, a little over 200,000 Bitcoin still. That's worth about $12 billion, and Mt. Gox, which is still distributing from the infamous hack that happened, back in 2014. They are set to distribute about 46,000 Bitcoin. The reason I think those numbers are important, as I just said, even if the U.S. sold all of theirs, and Mt. Gox did, that's still under what the ETF, BlackRock's ETF, is holding alone. So it shows you that there is an institutional appetite that's out there that's grabbing this. I did also notice that Glassnode, which I've talked about in the past as being a great on-chain metric company that has some good dashboards and some things you can get some good information out of. They had a nice write-up on how whales have been accumulating. So what tends to happen during these times of capitulation, where we do go through a stagnant price range, what you get is those people that are buying at those tops of 70,000, they're capitulating when they get down to these $56,000 levels. And what happens is you see a change in the flow of funds. You see where Bitcoin moves from those weaker hands, those short-term holders, and it moves back into the whales' hands and into the long-term holders' hands. I can tell you from my cohort of friends, as things, especially in the last, I'd say, 3 weeks or so, as things have hit these lower price points, a lot of talk of buying the dips. A lot of people that I would call sort of smart money in the Bitcoin area that are looking to acquire now. So just something to keep in mind. I know that there's been some uneasiness in the markets towards Bitcoin in general and crypto. To me, I'd say this is the calm before the storm. So get your boats filled up, get your bags filled, and get ready for what comes next. So let's take a look here. Let's get back into the general market here. Go back to our Quasar Live. Heat maps. I will point out the other thing I was really looking at this morning that I liked. Quasar Institutional News. Really great way to get your information. It's one of our premium services here on the platform. But like I was looking today, able to pull up great information about unusual option activity, and you can see that Futu Holdings, Lunar, UAL, LRCX, which is Lam Research, Hecla Mining, a bunch of them are seeing a huge amount of unusual activity and options. So we are seeing again a little bit of that zero DTA movement that we've talked about in the past. It's a little bit of gambling out there, but again, Quasar Institutional News able to see right away. UBS had cut Dell's price target to 158 from 164. MongoDB, we were just talking about that. One of the ones that I like to watch because of the volatility. They just raised the firm's price target to 295 from 250. I will point out MongoDB is just coming off of 52-week lows. I have them here in my other list. As I pointed out, they like to run, but their 52-week lows here were back, beginning of August. So, Interesting to see if they can make a run back. This is a stock that was as high as $500 last year, so definitely a fun stock to watch out there. Back up over a point on the NASDAQ, so we are seeing it move up here. Looks like it is challenging that first sort of resistance line I put in earlier. Rejected at it the first attempt here. So wasn't really able to break to new highs of the day here. That's what I'm really watching this morning to see if we can get that to get above that or not. SPY did briefly break to higher highs, so we are seeing a little bit more in the S&P there, a little bit more upward movement here. Seeing more good news. Barron's has an article, looks like, talking up MongoDB also. So it says they're rallying on earnings forecast. So we are seeing a little bit more talk about that. Seeing a few analysts jumping on the board here, talking up Alta on this dump. Let's see what they're saying here. We know Berkshire Hathaway had made a big entry in there. It looks like banking firm D.A. Davidson is looking for it to rebound. It says, look ahead, based on the timing of Sephora's rollout in Kohl's, we think Ulta's prestige share should start to rebound. D.A. Davidson analyst Michael Baker wrote in a note to clients. They see it as a buying opportunity, this dip. We've seen in general dip buyers, stepping in across the board. Like we said, crowd just sort of hit that same type of mentality. We're seeing Tesla actually move back up here today. Although now down under a point, it was up. I was watching their trend line a little bit lower than the linear regression. It looks like it tried to get above it, but it couldn't there. Dow Jones about flat here this morning. VIX starting to move up a little bit. I do want to take here before we take our break, take a little look at the retail sector that we know moved up nicely on earnings the other day, some of them, and see what they're doing there. Are we getting any positive movement? What do we have here? Here we almost see fairly symmetrical. Triangle forming on Nordstrom on the hourly chart. That can break either way. But those are sort of what I would be looking at there. It's held steady, but another one I would say looks to be sort of tiring out. Can't get much above 50 on the RSI right now. Going back to Wednesday. Kohl's, like I said, the other side of that the other side of that Ulta is that they have Sephora coming in. They're seeing a little bit of positive momentum still. Here it looks like you got to clear that 1990 to 20 range, and if you can get above 20, you've got some room to move up. But it would have to break 20 for me there to be looking at that. Foot Locker, we know, got beat up after their earnings. Had again seen to buy the dip buyers, but so far this morning, it looks like they're undipping. See an analyst report there. Looking at 30, so they raised it. So you got a little Tulsi. I saw Tulsi raised a few today. So they're definitely bullish right now. On the other side of that, although same type of area. So that 32 to 34 area seems to be where analysts think they're going to fall. Right now at 30.68. Smuckers has not really rebounded since earnings. Hasn't really dipped anymore either, so now you gotta be looking at sort of a smaller trend line here on the hourly. Can we get above that? Would be my first step to seeing some recovery there. Abercrombie, since it bottomed out here on Wednesday, has seen some decent step back from 134 to 144, about an 8% move back up. So that looks pretty good. It's tiring out these last 4 hours of the pre-market. See if it can get some momentum going into the day here. Talked about that. Super Microcomputer, which we know got hit by that short seller report, had been recovering a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later today. I saw a good article talking about the accuracy of some of these short selling reports, or the lack thereof, quite honestly, in recent times. So when we come back in our 11:30 lunch hour, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I think that that's something to keep in mind. Affirm, the buy now, pay later, that saw the nice increase on Wednesday. Trying to make a little move here today. Another one, though, you can see he's got that little resistance here, 42.90 to 43.50 area. Nutanix, which had jumped up nicely on their earnings beat, almost a 33% beat on earnings and a 2% beat on revenue that they had on Wednesday. You can see that that's one is daily linear regression, or excuse me, hourly linear regression, really keeping them in line. So as we take our final look here this morning, QQQ is up over a point here, led by NVIDIA up 2.81%, Crowd up 3.13%, Intel 7.55%. So again, tech leading the way back up here this morning on both NASDAQ and the SPY, now up over half a point. It is still early here at the 10 o'clock hour. We've seen some sell-off come mid-morning here. DXY is right about back at that 101.51 that we were at earlier in the week, so not much there. And again, volatility index at about 15.14, sort of at the lows of the day. So as we are getting into the trading hours, volatility seems to be shrinking down a little bit, seem to be getting more of an upward movement kind of day here for the morning. Question is, do we have the legs to keep this into the afternoon, or do we see the sell-off that we have seen most of the week? Thank you for joining me for this opening look at the markets. Again, I am Howard Greenberg, your host at Quasar Markets Live. I'll be back at 11:30 with our lunch hour. As I said, I have a few things to go over there. We're going to take a look at Chinese e-commerce a little bit more in detail and see how they're recovering and what we got going on there. And then a little bit more of a look into the short seller reports and how accurate have they been lately? What have they done for the stocks that they talk about? Thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.